In my upcoming interview with anti-fascist historian in exile Mark Bray, he said something that really helped me think about a nagging problem in a new way, which is how can an institution like the New York Times, to take one of many possible examples, be a longtime instrument of horrible US foreign policy and yet also maintain a legacy of hiring and supporting some excellent journalists? So, Mark's insight was about how liberal, centrist, and right wing visions of the world are not substantially different from fascist views of the world. They are different in terms of method and aesthetics, and each has their use in maintaining the status quo. So, just to drill down on the New York Times problem for those of you who are also troubled by it, it's how do they spend 2 years going to bat for Israel during a genocide while also doing important work on Doge and natural disasters and agriculture? How does the same paper that stokes genocidal revenge with a poorly sourced story like Screams Without Words, written by amateurs, and they don't retract it or correct it after an avalanche of debunking, how does that happen while they also run Hannah Dreyer's year-long investigation into child migrant labor around the country? So this is a vexing question for me as a Gen X leftist and writer, because I grew up believing in and valuing the vocation and even the heroism of solid journalism. And I was also successfully propagandized by conservatives and liberals to believe that the New York Times had a left-leaning bias. If Rush Limbaugh loathed it, I could believe that the Gray Lady saw the world with the eye of justice. And that impression was strong enough that just seeing the masthead on the newsstand and the font made me feel like if I didn't find a particular piece of reporting plausible or moral, the fault must be mine. I must be biased. I should read more. I should learn more. I should be more rational. But that wore away after years of being disgusted and betrayed by every third or even second article rationalizing neoliberalism or the latest foreign war, praising Clinton as he gutted welfare, Judith Miller selling the government on Iraq having WMDs, soft pedaling drone strikes by Obama. Everything following editorial standards and the style guide. So how does this seeming contradiction come about? Is the New York Times just a huge corporation that has to chase the broadest readership to make money for the shareholders? Yes. Is it multiple departments with varying levels of editorial skill and commitment and independence, often firewalled off from each other? Yes. Is it democracy at work with multiple viewpoints geared to compete in the marketplace of ideas? I think that's the impression we are meant to have. And it takes a long time to figure out that the marketplace of ideas serves narrow class interests, which means that in the end, it will never truly challenge capitalist realism. It is the paper of record in the sense that, in general, it records what happens in the empire of capital. So this brings me to anti-fascism. I was asking Mark Bray about what kinds of pre-existing normalized narratives or ideologies make a given culture more vulnerable to fascism. So we talked about American exceptionalism, the basic bigotries of sexism, racism, and homophobia, and things like inheriting a narrative about settler culture that colonialism was maybe tragic, but it was very much in the past, and basically things were okay now. He argued that the dividing line between centrists or conservative or right-wing knowledge production and fascist propaganda wasn't really about content. It was more about the orientation to modes of persuasion.
There are elements of continuity between what you would call straightforwardly fascist propaganda and politics and the broader ocean of right-wing centrist kind of reactionary ideas. There's a lot of overlap there, and so that's worth bearing in mind.
Right.
I think that where you can start to call it fascist is when it's completely divorced from sources. So then that gets into the whole question of fake news and AI and deep fakes and everything that, for example, is critical of Trump is made up and is not real, and who's to say what's real. So I think that because fascism is a rejection of rationality at its foundation, which is hard for some people to wrap their minds around, because we all, I think, or many of us like to think of ourselves as working off of rationality, even if maybe we do that less than we think. But fascism emerged as what fascists considered to be this kind of virile, masculine rejection of what they perceived as kind of effeminate, Jewish, depending on the context, life-denying ways of thinking, right? So Mussolini said, I contradict myself, I don't give a damn. So
Right.
if we think of it in an educational context, I think it's basically giving up on the question of sources, that the information is real based on an authority figure whose authority is not subject to question or justification.
So here's how I'm seeing it now. Both the mainstream liberal centrist pundit and the fascist hold the same basic analysis of history, that capitalism and the global north-south order and the color line is just the way things are and the only way things could be. It just makes sense that the US has 700 military bases around the world and undermines another socialist movement somewhere in the world every week. Now, the liberal centrist might get melancholic over the state of the world while the fascist celebrates, but for the most part, they both endorse the basic logic of global capital. That's the continuity in content that Bray is talking about. In New York Times world, that system needs to at least appear to be supported by facts, evidence, procedures of verification. But when the shit hits the fan, say when Israel is involved, all of those things can be gamed because in some cases, the test isn't whether the paper produces the truth, it's whether it produces material that makes the global status quo plausible and defensible. So I don't want to get too galaxy brained here, and I'm not proposing any kind of conspiratorial intent. I don't see any mustache twirling going on, and I don't think it's worth looking for it. What I'm saying is that if we're wondering why the New York Times is able to assign and fund excellent investigations on the 17th floor while parroting the State Department on the 18th floor, it's that the 18th floor needs the credibility support of the 17th floor to sell American exceptionalism to the mainstream. The centrist view of the world will try to persuade until persuasion fails, and then the boot comes down. The credibility that solid journalism provides is worth paying for until capital decides it's not. And this is why the Barry Weiss takeover of CBS is an important moment, because we can already see the content continuity between centrist and fascist views. But when she sits down in her corner office at CBS, the method continuity gets locked in because Weiss is a mask-off hack and propagandist. And by hiring her, CBS is saying it's no longer beholden to respectable standards. They don't need them because the fascist method has now moved to the center. Now, if this all feels bleak, I would just like to say that you're hearing it on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever for as long as Larry Ellison and his pals will allow it. But you are hearing it. And I, for one, have been blown away by the courage of many creators on these platforms who are cutting a new, seemingly impossible and independent path. And if this all gets shut down, we'll be in the cafes.